Let's try to understand y equals cos inverse of x. The first thing we should do is sketch the graph of y equals cos x. Y equals cos x looks like this. This is a periodic function. It goes as high as 1 and as low as -1, and it repeats every 2 pi, or if you're working in degrees, it repeats every 360 degrees. Let's try to stick to radians. Looking at this function, does it have an inverse? No, it fails the horizontal line test. But we would like it to have an inverse. In fact, if you look at your calculator, there's an inverse cosine button. So what is that inverse? The answer to that question is, if we restrict the domain and just look at a little piece of this function, or the biggest possible piece that we can think of that does pass the horizontal line test, then we can discuss an inverse. So let's take the piece that goes from 0, from x equals 0 to x equal pi. That piece passes the horizontal line test. There's no horizontal line that you can draw that will pass through that little red piece more than once. And so that piece does have an inverse. So let's look at the two functions, y equals cos x with its restricted domain, and y equals cos inverse of x. And let's talk about the domain and the range of these two functions. So first of all, for y equals cos x, we restricted the domain to the interval from 0 to pi. And so its inverse has that as its range, 0 to pi. And for y equals cosine of x, its range is the interval from -1 to 1. So y equals cos inverse of x has as its domain -1 to 1. And the last question that we might want to know about is, what about the zeros of y equals cos inverse of x? In order to think about zeros, you want to think about what value of x would give a 0 for y. What value for x would give a 0 for y? In other words, 0 is equal to cos inverse of x. But that's the same thing as saying cos of 0 is equal to x. So what is the cos of 0? The cos of 0 is 1. Cos of 0 is 1. So 0 is equal to cos inverse of 1. So the 0 of the cos inverse function is, the 0 of the cos inverse function is x equal to 1. So there you have domain, range, and zeros.